right, everybody. Thanks for joining us on the Evolution Security Podcast. We are the EvoSec Tactical Twins, Eric and Aaron Davis, and we have someone on that has become a good friend in this industry, and then as a mutual podcaster too. We're just excited to have Lee Weems on again. I think this is maybe 3 times now.
I think so.
3 or 4. But how you doing, buddy? Glad you're on again.
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Not badly. I'll just say from my perspective, I was sitting here and then I get the text, and at first I saw it on my iPad, and my iPad doesn't have your name on it. Mm-hmm. And I saw, hey, I'm available this evening. and I'm like, who is some chick got my number that I don't know about? And
you better you better delete that text fast.
Well, you had text several weeks ago about trying to do a show that week, and I was so tied up with stuff, and we couldn't make it happen. And I had yesterday evening free, and I'm like, hey, wait a minute, I can do this evening. So I just responded back to that.
Oh, no, Lee, it was perfectly fine. When I grabbed my phone, I'm like, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
But at first I was like, boy, who is this? And of course I'm absolutely, I sit there and joke about things like that, man. I'm a very faithful husband. It was just funny that this is the first thing, is like, some chick mistake me for somebody else.
When are you coming over, dude?
Yeah. So
Eric, it's a little reminiscent of, remember we were trying to get Tim Alexander from Primus on?
Yep.
And it felt like he was ghosting us a little bit. And then all of a sudden, I think he texted us on Saturday. He's on tour with Primus for that Rush tribute tour.
Yep.
And he says, hey, guys, I'm open tomorrow.
No, Aaron, it was that day.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
It was either the day before or the day of. And, we're like, does the Pope wear a funny hat? Yeah, we're available too.
Yeah, it's funny because when he texted us, I was in my home gym working out, and my wife and I had plans that afternoon. But yeah, it absolutely felt like he was ghosting us. And it was like 2 times he canceled on us. One of them was that he had an aching tooth and had to go to the dentist. And at first, we're like, this sounds like
I'm washing my hair kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that ended up being a great show, and we thought we were going to tread lightly on the gun issue, and he starts out right away before we get on. Man, I was looking forward to talking to you guys. I'm wanting to get back into training jiu-jitsu and some shooting. Okay.
Yep.
So,
well, enough about that. Yep. That was kind of fun, though. Well, Lee, yes, to the point yesterday, back to your text, Aaron and I had a plan to do one of our Gear and Mindset shows, and when you text, it was just kismet, man. So we threw something together. Audience members, if it sounds like we're floundering a little bit, it's because we threw these set of topics together. I don't think it's going to be that way at all, but
we also can, especially with Lee on here, we can chat off the cuff and have some good stuff to talk about and good commentary.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Well, Lee, let's go ahead and get a quick bio from you. It doesn't have to be a large one. We can point everybody back towards your previous shows, but give us a rundown of who you are and what you're currently up to.
Well, hey there, everybody. I am in my 26th year as a peace officer. I prefer peace officer to law enforcement officer.
Nice.
I recently changed agencies, and I don't want to say the name of the agency online because I don't want it to be a social media thing, but I'll tell people in person. But I am now full-time training for an organization that does training. That's what we do. And
awesome.
So that's fun. I'm getting to work with people all day, every day, training versus sometimes in the field, sometimes training, etc. Um, I kind of live in a couple of different worlds. I have the law enforcement thing, peace officer thing going on, which is my full time gig. And then I also walk in the academic world. I'm an adjunct professor for a college here in Georgia. I teach American government political science classes. I may be delving into some criminal justice stuff for them soon, and we're kind of dealing with an accreditation issue on that. Um, but I've been doing that now for 10 years. And this fall, I went back to graduate school for my second trip to get, it's not a full on degree, it's what's called a graduate certificate, which is basically think of it like it's a graduate minor, but you can
Mhm.
do them independently of a degree. Whereas
Oh,
a
that's
minor
cool.
you have to do along with a degree when you're doing undergrad stuff. So I'm getting a graduate certificate in workforce and adult education from Oklahoma State, and finish with that here in just a few weeks.
Well,
And
Lee, I was reading that the description, and I thought, man, this is right up Lee's alleyway with what you focus on. So yeah, we can certainly talk a little more about that. But you go ahead
sure,
and continue, buddy.
that's I get home from work each day, and then I go right back to work because I sit down at the computer to do the classwork for either the classes that I'm taking or the classes that I'm teaching. And that's, you know, pretty much the whole thing. My world is either doing the cop thing or it's doing the academic thing, and then occasionally I try to get in some family stuff when time allows for that. Um, which is funny. Yes, sometimes I try to interrelate it when I can, but it's been a wild ride over the last 25 years. Sometimes I sit back and I look at the list of stuff and I go, "Wow, how did I do all that?" But none of that matters. Let's go do the next thing.
Yeah.
And uh, it's like it's never enough. Let's keep going and getting one more.
Yeah,
Cool.
And
it certainly sounds like it. You and the other thought I've always had about you as well is that you're the forever student. And when I say, I mean, I would like to say that I'm a forever student. I know Aaron is too, but you just keep going back to school, man.
yeah, it's funny. I almost stopped about halfway through this program. Because I've already got a master's degree. This isn't going to. It's going to add a nice credential, but it's not like it's going to add any level of graduate work or anything as far as like degrees go, uh, other than the certificate. But mainly doing it for personal enrichment. It's not like it's going
There
to
you
add
go.
for job stuff and everything. And I changed jobs in the middle of it. Everything else, like maybe I just won't finish this. And then I lost my father last year, and I remember the look on his face when I quit the little league baseball team. And it's like I can't quit doing this. I've got to get finished. And as we've rolled on, I'm in the last class of the sequence. I caught myself the other day looking at other programs to start when I finished this one, because I have, as much as I get aggravated about having to do the work, and it's kept me from being able to do some other things. Like I haven't generated any business revenue since September because I haven't been able to teach any classes with the open enrollment stuff. I have really enjoyed being back in the classroom as a student. It has been fun to be on this side of the table again, and exploring a field that, while it's something that I do, is not something directly related to all the other academic work that I've done. And so I've actually been, looking for other programs that are in completely different areas. I caught myself looking at a forensic psychology program, which, while the forensics ties in, I have no background in psychology whatsoever.
Oh, that sounds
Uh,
like a good program.
and I was looking into some business stuff. Just this has been fun. I want to go study things that I've never studied.
Hey, what about, have you thought about doing a certificate in economics if they have that available? Or maybe you already have some instruction in economics.
Very, very, very little. I haven't done anything along the business economic side whatsoever. I have an associate's in general studies, because the college that I got that from did not issue them at the time in like political science and history. If I were there now, I would have like a double political science history one. I have a bachelor's degree in political science with a minor in history. And then my master's degree is in public administration, which is a subfield of political science. It's basically just take the B out of a Master of Business Administration and insert the P for doing it for the government.
Well,
Yeah.
one point and then one question.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I've often thought about getting a second degree in economics. I don't think I'm going to do that now, but I think I am going to delve back into it at least,
Yeah.
maybe in some type of certificate program like you're talking about, or just simply hitting all the Hillsdale and free college courses you can take. The MIT has free courses.
Yeah.
Now, of course, it's the same thing. You don't get credit for it, but I mean, you just watch their lectures and can get all the work and stuff. But so the reason why I'm so fascinated with economics is it explains about every decision that people make, not just about money, but just the way society moves, innovation, all of that stuff. And what I like to say is, if I misspoke on a show earlier, a couple of weeks ago or so, I was talking about the main fields of economics, but if people understood the basics of macroeconomics, aggregate demand and supply, or supply and demand in any good, and including wages and labor, the markets for labor, the politicians would not get away with the crap they get away with.
Well, you just unwittingly reorganized the entire show format because now we've got to talk about something we were going. Hey, if we have time, we'll do that if I may.
Yep.
All right. The shooting part of the revolution started in 1775. We formally declared independence in 1776. In 1777, the Second Continental Congress began drafting the Articles of Confederation, which were not ratified until 1781. At that point in time, the Articles of Confederation became our national government, and the Confederation Congress was the national governing body. The revolution effectively is ended by 1783. By 1786, we're already having conventions because we realized the Articles of Confederation aren't working. In 1787, we're actually shooting at each other over this stuff. In Western Massachusetts, you had what is known as Shays' Rebellion occur. And basically, it was an armed uprising. They were going to try to overthrow the government of the now state of Massachusetts. And that whole thing boiled down to is that the Confederation Congress had no power to regulate trade, be it international trade nor interstate trade. And there was also no power to regulate currency. And so each state had its own currency. Well, some of the states had started issuing paper currency, which devalued the hard currency. And that hurt the people. So if you were a hard currency person and you had lots of money, all of a sudden there's paper money, your money's worthless. So you just lost because they issued the paper currency. Eastern Massachusetts was a hard currency cash economy because it had been established longer than the whole Western Massachusetts farmlands had. You also had the merchants that they bought from in Europe were now, because of the revolution, were not extending lines of credit to American businesses. You had to pay with everything in hard currency. So it makes sense that if they have to pay for their supplies with hard currency, they want to get paid with hard currency in return. Well, now you have this whole segment of society that has no hard currency to make those payments with, and they're losing their land to debtors. The tax collectors are taking their lands. And like, we just fought a war over this. Let's fight another one. And basically, the eastern portion of Massachusetts raised the money because the federal government could not do it. The federal government had no power to tax at this time. They privately funded a militia led by Benjamin Lincoln, who was Washington's second in command, to put down Shays' Rebellion. And after that, it's like, okay, now we've got to have another convention to decide what to do. That convention ultimately ended up drafting the Constitution. So we know it as the Constitutional Convention. When the people that showed up, that's not what it was called. They showed up for the Philadelphia Convention. All of that transpired over money and its value.
Interesting.
The people in the western portion of Massachusetts were wanting the state to issue paper money. And the people in the eastern portion of the state were like, we all have hard currency. If you issue paper money, our economic status is lessened. We don't want that. And so within just a few years of the revolution, we're already shooting at each other again over the value of a dollar.
Wow.
Yeah. And Lee, it's interesting. I have a very macro view of that segment in history, mainly because it's the precursor to our Constitution. Now, the Articles of Confederation, to my remembrance, that was the main issue. The states could damn well do whatever they wanted to. It was such a loose, essentially a loose document that it created chaos to my remembrance. But yeah, that's an excellent history lesson, because my real history knowledge is still macro, but a lot of it really starts at the Constitutional Convention, as you mentioned, was known as the Philadelphia Convention. So that's pretty cool, Lee. Thanks for that lesson there, buddy.
The Constitution is the third national government of the United States.
Interesting.
We tend to forget about the other two. But, it was not, common understanding of history is we win the revolution and we elect George Washington as president. That didn't take place until 9 years after the revolution is effectively over. 8 years. And we tend to forget about that whole intervening period, because there was this huge societal debate over, we've won the revolution, now what? Now what do we do? And if it hadn't have been for Washington just walking away from power, he was in position, he could have seized it all and made himself the king of America.
Right. And some wanted him to.
Right. Which is kind of funny. He actually did it multiple times. Walked away from ultimate power. Because the funny thing is he actually bungled up and started what we know as the French and Indian War, which ultimately led to the revolution. And then he, as we know, he leads the Continental Army to victory and then walks away, goes back to his farm. We eventually create the Constitution and ratify it. He gets elected as the first president after 2 terms, says, that's it, I'm done, I'm going back to Mount Vernon, and walks away. He later gets appointed as commanding general of the Army again. So he repeatedly keeps getting called back into public life, and then, all right, everything's settled down, I'm going home. And we don't see that these days. People tend to get into public life and they stay there unless they get thrown out.
Which, and Washington was extremely wealthy as well. And so, really, I'm ready to get back to my life. Let me go back to making money. I'm kidding. Of course, George Washington was, of course, he was a patriot, and he wanted to, help as best he could take care of the young nation that he helped establish. So yeah, that's awesome, Lee. So, you hit it on the head. We've kind of changed the order of the show, which it really is I think is an important segue. So,
hey, bro,
ahead,
real
Aaron.
quick, I know we're geeking out here, but I just wanted to put a bow on the economics thing. Literally one simple thing that more than likely would not get support if people just throw out, it's supply and demand. Well, that is true, But a lot of what they don't understand is where supply and demand meet, there's equilibrium price. Now, we can say that's just theory, but it's really not. It's just how many variables can you graph, but you can state in general with you can graph so many things on a supply and demand graph that explains, at least in general, what happens. Now, it's going to be kind of hard to see this, but long story short, if minimum wage is what I'm talking about. So we've got our demand curve with a negative slope, and we've got our supply curve with a positive slope. Let's say that at $10 an hour, there are 10 employees demanded, and that's at equilibrium, where demand and supply meet. Well, if the government comes in and says, no, we want a $15 an hour wage, what that does is it decreases the demand for employees. So you reduce employment, but yet you increase the supply of employees that want that higher wage, but they can't get it. So again, that's an example, right, of a price floor creating disequilibrium. And if people understood those things and across the board, you can explain every price ceiling and every price floor with a simple graph like this.
You know, I teach for freshman political science, the American government class. And one of the things I used to have them do in their class was I gave them a scenario. You're a business owner. You have X amount of dollars
Yep.
to pay employees. The government increases minimum, and you're paying them at minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
The government increases minimum wage, but you still have only X dollar amount
100%.
to pay your employees. Are you going to reduce the hours that your employees are working to stay within your X dollar amount? Are you going to lay off or fire one of your employees so that you can pay the other ones at the new now government mandated rate?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to raise prices, which means you may lose business? And I make them go through all that because, in the start of the session, they would be all, we need higher minimum wage and we need free college tuition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, one, the federal government does not control education. So the federal government, the only way they could legally give free college tuition would be individual grants and payments to the state, because we can't make the states do it. But okay, let's work through these problems. It's easy to say that, the minimum wage should be $20 an hour. All right. Which employer are you going to fire?
Yep.
How are you going to get to that? Just simple economics. When I was in college, I took a job on undergrad. I took a job on campus making minimum wage. Arby's used to run their $5 for $5 roast beef sandwich deal. And I loved it whenever they would do that, because I would go in, I would buy 5 of them, and that's what I had for my meals for like the next 3 days. Yeah, because minimum wage went up. I'm like, yay, I got a raise. The 5 for $5 immediately went to 5 for $5.55.
Mm-hmm.
So, my paycheck was bigger, but what I could buy with it did not get bigger.
Yeah.
It just stayed the same. And the last time I saw them run that deal, it was like 5 for $5.95.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so okay, we're doing the same thing, but we're increasing the price with it. And that's just a simple economic thing.
Yeah, and Lee, you hit on something that also is a important reminder of when minimum wage is set at higher rates that supposedly is a living wage, to use the Marxist terms, just my opinion there, is that I think what one of the most important detriments of that is that young kids let's say 15 and a half, 16 years old, can no longer then find a job to work during high school, learn responsibility, learn to arrive on time and, work with the team, and then also manage money at a young age. So again, politicians that set these minimum wage standards, they and some of them likely know this, but there are major there's unintended consequences that are always a part of, let's just raise wages. And I think that's one of the most important things to look at, is how it's detrimental to young kids. And it's proven out in crime, it's proven out in theft, all of those things.
Well, one last thing, and let's get to some martial arts or something, and we're going to lose some of our audience here. Hopefully not, though. But here's another key thing, and then we can move on.
Uh-huh.
The amazing thing is, and Lee, I like saying stuff, and then you just add more to the point that I was making. The fixed dollar amount for wages. But back to that fixed dollar amount for wages for employees. Guess who loves minimum wage laws? Unions.
Mm-hmm.
Because you raise the price for less skilled workers, it increases or maintains the demand for higher skilled, higher paid workers. Mm-hmm. Okay, if we're going to have to pay so much, we're going to make sure we're going to get our marginal utility out of these employees.
Yeah.
So unions love minimum wage. And none of those guys are getting paid minimum wage.
Right. Well, just a couple of quick things on that. One, the minimum wage came about basically to keep factories from moving out of the Northeast to the Southeast and the West, because they have to pay X dollar amount in the Northeast, but if we go to the South, we can pay less. If we go out west, we can pay less. And so the minimum wage just made, okay, now there's a national floor, so there's no economic benefit for moving your factory from, Massachusetts or New York to Georgia or Tennessee. And so what that did was, if the cost of manufacturing, we can't make that cheaper here in the United States, well, then we'll just do it overseas. And so we drove the wages right out of the country to
full circle to reduced employment. Guys. So we did not plan to talk about this, but it is illustrative back to the concept of education and my love of economics that Lee and Eric. So obviously we can say that economics, the understanding of economics, can explain lots of behavior beyond money.
Yep.
All right. Eric, you ring us back in here, brother.
No, this is great. This is great discussion. And I said this a couple of shows ago as well, or maybe when we had Rich on. Ultimately, this is a show, and Lee's show as well. It's about, self-defense, self-preservation. Economics affects crime rates drastically, so when we talk about these things, that's why we also talk about, that's why it's important whom you vote for, because depending on who you vote for, you get a certain economic theory, because especially when you vote for a certain set of politicians, you get theory more than application or science. So, but anyway, so that's my closing statement on that. So, it still revolves around self-defense. With that said, we kind of started hitting on, the original or the first American Revolution. And Aaron and I, again, have talked a lot about the state of the Republic recently. And, Rich Brown's been having some incredible guests over on his show as well on some of the same subjects. I also have heard Victor Davis Hanson and Dr. Larry Arnn of Hillsdale both recently talk about the possibility and where the direction that we're heading is that we're heading in a direction that could end up bringing us to a second civil war. And I am absolutely in the belief that our resolution is still political. But with the current division and very, very much venomous attitude towards the, both sides, if we want to talk in those, that's also simplistic because we know it's not just two sides, but it is absolutely, we really do have, the left, pitting certain swaths of society against another. So it is kind of a them and us. But anyway, I just wanted to know your thoughts on, do you think we are heading in that direction of a possible second civil war?
Well, first, if you think I can geek out on gun stuff, that's nothing compared to the level of geekiosity I have on this kind of thing.
Yes, sir.
I have to object to the phrase Civil War.
Okay.
The unpleasantness of 1861 to 1865 was not a civil war. A civil war is multiple factions fighting over control of the same government. And what you had was a failed revolution or a failed secession movement that was put down militarily.
Good point.
If it was a civil war, then the 14th Amendment was never ratified. And that undoes all of the civil rights legislation.
Sure.
Because the southern states were then not represented in Congress. Congress also forced the southern states, after they had been militarily subjugated, to go through a readmission process to the Union. Well, if they never left the Union, why did they have to be readmitted? So,
very good point.
Yeah. The South broke away, created its own country. That country was then conquered and forced to be a member of the club again. So when people start talking about, it's worse in this country than it's ever been. Well, there was that time in 1861 where we did actually go to a shooting war over this. That's not the first time that we did a shooting war. As I already talked about, 1787, we were shooting at each other. There have been multiple other times throughout our history where we've had such instances. The War of 1812 was not a unanimous let's go to war with England movement. The New England states were actually very economically damaged by that, and there was talk in those states of splitting off at that point in time and making their own deal with England. Even before that, you had Aaron Burr, who was the third vice president of the United States. I think he was third. He was the vice president for the third president. There may have been others. But Aaron Burr, as the sitting vice president, actually hatched a plot where he was going to seize everything west of the Appalachian Mountains and make himself the emperor of a new country there.
Wow.
So you had that. All throughout our history, we've had, as a country, we've had secessionist movements, we've had factions, we've had everything else. We're living in the contemporary time, and so we're seeing it unfold, and because of our technology, we can see it unfold by the minute versus by the hour and the day.
Mm-hmm.
We think it's just horrible. It is horrible, but let's put it in perspective of where we've been. Also, if you look at gun guy social media, you think that there's this whole concept of all of their guys are going to line up on one side of the battlefield. We're going to line up on our side of the battlefield. We've got the guns, so we'll win. That's not what it'll be. It'll be you walk out to your car and the guy 3 houses down takes shots at you because you disagree politically. Your wife and your daughter get gang raped because you took a different position on something. That's what it's going to be if it breaks out. It's not going to be uniformed armies clashing against each other.
I think ultimately we have too many factions within states for it to be that way. I think, I've heard it stated this way multiple times from multiple sources that that it would be more of a balkanization than it would be two sides. And I absolutely agree with you also, Lee, on something you said. We are definitely not in a worse time than we were in 1861. Absolutely not. That's why I premised my first part of the discussion on, I believe that our remedies currently are still political. Aaron, what you got?
Well, I hope I'm not cutting off the discussion by asking this kind of cut to the chase question. But how long is the federal government going to allow? Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying they have legal power or the constitutional power to do so, but how long are they going to let something like that go on until they send in, let's just say, the National Guard, so they can at least have the facade that it's not the federal government using the military? But what are your thoughts on that? How long would they allow it to happen, to occur, where those scenarios you're talking about, guy down the street running his bolt action gun at you?
I think if it truly broke out widespread across the country, the federal government would be powerless to respond.
Really?
I don't think it has
Yeah,
the
but you would.
resources or the organization to do so.
Yeah, and
So,
what
but
I would
it would
go ahead,
would
Aaron.
have to break out at a significant level, though, in that case, right? Or
Yeah. If all of a sudden, say it broke out, Texas decides to take a vote because, all the Texans love to claim that they can leave the Union because of
They're
a treaty. Well,
they're
yeah.
continually talking about it. Yep.
So, say Texas, it finally breaks out, gets bad enough, and Texas tries to leave the Union. The federal government does have the resources to militarily respond to that and deal with that. But if it's broken out all over the United States, there's no way the federal government has the resources to respond to on any kind of great scale. And people are sitting, throwing things at their car radio and their computer right now. They have to have organization, and the federal government's extremely disorganized. Every government, and it's not just the feds. Every government is extremely disorganized and is actually operating on a shoestring. And I know we look at the total dollar amount and everything, but that's spread pretty thin. And how do you the three of us live in three different cities, three different areas of the country. If it's broken out in all three of our locations, that's three different theaters of operation
Yep.
that they're having to deal with. What do you do when it's 50 theaters of operation to deal with? 100 theaters of operation. And I think what we'll see if we start to break down, okay, the unpleasantness of 1861 to 1865, which I like to call the War of Secession, we had state lines, Drew. We knew where the conflicts were, what was going to happen. I think we're looking at, if society breaks down, more of a urban versus rural thing that's going to be so widespread across the country. And then you end up having geographically, you use the term balkanization. Okay, yeah, maybe the Southeast, Texas, Oklahoma, that area, they all kind of break up and we have a bunch of different countries. But still, even at that, you're still going to have, if Texas were to, do their Texas thing that they talk about, you still got Dallas is completely different than rural Texas.
And
They're still
Austin.
gonna, they're still gonna have those issues.
That Austin is San Francisco too.
Right. You're still gonna have all of those same issues that we're having now. Here in Georgia, we have Atlanta and we have not Atlanta, Georgia.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
that 285 donut
Fulton County.
Is so vastly different from the rest of the state. And people talk about Georgia's turned purple or whatever. No, it hasn't. Atlanta has, but Georgia hasn't. Yeah, Georgia elected 2 Democratic United States senators. Yeah, we did. But the problem with that is that the Republican Party ran just horrible candidates. Horrible. Herschel Walker was a great football player, a great athlete. The man's stone cold crazy. It's complete, well documented about all the mental issues this guy's got. And so he said the nice things about President Trump on the morning radio, morning TV shows and everything. And okay, we'll make him the Republican nominee. Anybody who ran on the Democrat side was going to beat him. He finished 5 points in the polls lower than the Republican governor nominee, because there were Republicans that went to the polls said, yeah, he's got an R by his name, but I just can't vote for this guy.
Well, and so now we get a Warnock. And when I say we, I'm a believer that the 17th Amendment created national senators versus necessarily the state associated, senators. But yeah,
and that also removed a block on federal power.
Yep, absolutely good, very good point. Yeah, it's to me, and this is what I was going to bring up, coming from my military background and still involved today in my day job, is that I also believe that there is still a majority of the military that would not follow the orders of a government that would try to use the military against the citizenry. You would see a vast exodus, excuse me, of the conservatives for certain would go, I'm going to go protect my family. Or just simply you would have plenty of commanders, especially on the combat arms side. There's something that's very much misunderstood. Yes, we absolutely have a woke, that word's probably starting to get trite these days, but let's just use it. So we have a very woke brass inside our military. To make it at flag rank inside the military currently, you have to be, or at least feign being a leftist these days. Some folks sneak through, but there is one truism, is that the bulk of combat arms are conservative leaning soldiers. And so that's one aspect that I truthfully believe, is that if there was anything that would kick off where the federal government would decide, okay, we've got to start quelling, and Aaron, to your point, they would probably start with the National Guard. You'd have governors, under Title 32 would possibly start that process. And then maybe also the federal government then go into Title 10 and say, hey, we're activating the National Guard for national service. Anyway, to that point, I just believe that won't go over well for the Pentagon if they were a part of that, and the federal government, the executive branch. I just don't think it would go well. I'll ask your thoughts on that, Lee, from your historical perspective.
I don't think the federal government's going to be the big bogeyman in that whole scenario. Now, I used to have this belief that should we ever have the scenario that we're talking about, any of this kind of stuff, that there were still enough good Americans left that they would rise up and stand tall and put a stop to it. COVID completely disillusioned me to that belief. At the time when COVID was taking place, I was the chief deputy of a very, very prosperous county in Georgia, of the sheriff's office of the county. Very prosperous, very, quote, Republican enclave in the state. And there were people who were literally willing. If I had lined up trains to put people on and ship them off to camps, over COVID, there were people that were willing to support that. They all by their name, that they waved flags, they thumped their chest about America. And then all of a sudden, because I used to wonder how did Mussolini do the things he did in Italy? How did Hitler do the things that he did in Germany? How did the people go along with that? And then all of a sudden I saw it in front of my very own eyes, and the stuff that people were asking, demanding that I do. And it's like, no, we're not doing that. I think the bigger issue is you're going to have to look at what's going to go on with your local governments, your state governments, and the like. Because, like in the response to COVID, the little town where I live passed a curfew in the early days of the COVID thing. Because apparently it was only a nocturnal disease that you could only get at night.
Yeah.
You know, now I went out every day, every evening, and I violated the curfew on purpose.
Good for you.
Because there was no basis and rationale for it, and I was going to make them prove their case in court. They never stopped me and never charged me with it, but I went out with it constantly. Matter of fact, one night I came home, I kind of dozed off watching TV, woke up, and it was 11:58. And I said, I have not violated the curfew today. And I ran outside, ran out into the street, and left my property so that I could keep my streak alive. Then our governor actually stepped in and put a stop to it. I said, all right, all you local governments, stop this. We're going to have a statewide rule, and only the sheriffs can enforce it. And only the state public health can enforce it. Because, the sheriffs are elected, and they were going to have to answer back to their population. That was the governor's methodology on that. In the meantime, you have up in the Northeast, I think it was Rhode Island, where their governor was ordering the state police, and I may be wrong on the state and everything. Was one of the states up there was like ordering their state police and National Guard to go find people that had left New York State, the cities, and had come into their state and were trying to hide them, was forcing them into quarantines.
I remember that.
Okay. Michigan's governor went kind of haywire with power in response to some of the COVID stuff. So I think that's a bigger threat than the federal government doing
it. And so what I would not retort, that's not an accurate statement. What I would also say, and again, this is coming from my time, dealing with COVID inside the Army, is I had some of the same. I was deployed to Iraq when this was all going on, and the reaction was unbelievable to me. You got COVID, you were put into a compound to be with all the other lepers, and it was wild to me. But to that point, I was one of those that refused to get vaccinated, and I was, all kinds of both friends, colleagues, soldiers that I know very well. Some of them, unfortunately, and that's what I feel glad that I stuck to my guns, because I was close to losing my job, and I know Aaron was in his as well, in a civilian job. But now you talk to other people, but excuse me, let me digress a second, finish that thought, is that there was a lot of individuals said, I was afraid of losing my job and my livelihood, so I just gave in, even though I knew against my own conscience that I shouldn't take that shot. But that said, I'm wondering, Lee, I think there's plenty of people that went through COVID and the draconian measures that they were like, oh, yeah, I got to do what the government says. But I think there also is a lot of people that said never again. I hope there's enough of them is the problem. So that was my statement in response.
Well, I think in real time, people were scared and they didn't know. And then as time has passed and they realized, I think a lot of people had realized that we were being lied to and that a lot of stuff was just being made up out of whole cloth and just put out to the public with no basis in it whatsoever. And so it's probably created a greater sense of skepticism than we may have had before. And so maybe on the whole, people won't buy into stuff if something like this comes down the pipe again. But I don't know.
It is a 50-50 chance, frankly. Aaron, go ahead.
So your point on the local government, I just wanted to double down on that, and I hadn't really thought about that, Lee. But again, and I'm going to call his ass out by name, G.T. Bynum, here, the mayor in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He's a Republican too. He gleefully seized a sort of power and started having sending out edicts about what people could do, what restaurants could do, what businesses could do, and he'd have a daily briefing on what he was going to change and give back or increase the measures. I play guitar for the ORU basketball pep band. I've done that, I realized, for 22 years. It's a fun gig.
I didn't realize that long. Yeah,
bro. I get to crank up my gear and you know, you don't get to crank up tube amps at gigs much anymore. There I get to, and go to certain tournaments like the NCAA last year. And dude, I'm proud to say we're the best band that any college ever brings out. So it's pretty dang cool. We always get talked about in the sports press. But I digress back to the point that GT Bynum walked up next to me about 2 months ago. Man, I was sneering at his ass, wishing I could say something to him. And the problem is I can't vote for him, vote against him, vote for him because of where I live. And yet, of course, yeah. So that just doubles down on what you're saying, is that the local governments may be who you're most concerned about.
You know, our governor and all of his executive order stuff, put this limit on no more than 10 people in and at a time. And I was getting citizens were like, they would go to a restaurant to try to get food, and they're going to get a takeout order type deal. And like, they would take pictures of how many people were standing in line and were sending it to me. You need to come do something about this. I said, well, you just need to leave. What do you mean? I said, well, if there are too many people there, you're one of them.
Awesome.
You had to go in there to take that picture. You're part of the violation. You need to leave. This is your response. Yes, this is my response. I had to explain to a citizen there were people at a county park in open air, out on fields in like isolated family groups getting exercise. And how dare they be out there? You should go find them right now. So I don't have the power to go find them. Yes, you do. You're the sheriff's office. I can go issue a citation. They have a right to fight that citation in court. If they choose to have a jury trial, we have to have 44 jurors show up. Are you willing to go be in the courtroom right now and be one of the 44 jurors that shows up for a panel they can select 12 jurors from? Well, no, I don't want to be in that. Well, okay. Then they have to have a trial. They have to get convicted. And if they get convicted, the judge may impose a fine.
Fine.
Yeah, may impose a fine. But I can't just go, you have to give me $47 right now. And they had no concept of that. It's like, where were you in civics class in school? How do you not understand this? Yeah, but they're just, people don't have, they live here, but they don't have a functional understanding of what's going on or how the system works.
Well, Lee, I kind of have a funny story. At least I think it's kind of funny, and it points back to, again, the folks that make flag rank inside the Army or the armed forces. So before I went up to Iraq, this last deployment, I was waiting on my red packet. So I was sitting there in Kuwait, and one of my buddies, when they shut down the gyms, we're like, well, screw it. Everybody else is finding something they can do outside, not within a crowd. Finding, there's, of course, outdoor gym equipment, pull-up bars, and, folks found dumbbells and kettlebells and brought them to, certain areas throughout the post. And one of my buddies that was there with me, he trained in jiu-jitsu as well, and was like, man, well, let's go find a spot on the freaking grass or the turf, and let's just go train, because everybody else is finding a way to get their PT in. We're going to do the same. And of course, that was part of the directive, was that, the gyms had to be closed. They didn't say you couldn't, be out and try to get some PT on your own. There was no policy against that at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so my buddy and I were out there training and, doing some jiu-jitsu on the turf. And I see these two soldiers walking up to us. And mind you, there was a gaggle of soldiers and PTs, and they weren't doing PT. They're just BSing, just talking,
Mm-hmm.
smoking, and joking, as we say it. But these two soldiers walk up to myself and my colleague, who were both civilians, and this soldier looked at me, "Sir, who do you work for?" And I look up and I see his 2 stars on his chest. So here's a 2-star general coming up to me as a civilian, asking me who I work for. And then I explained to him, and I won't say my agency over the air, just because it's not necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But I told him my agency, and he said, "Oh, so what contractor do you work for?" I said, "Sir, I don't work for a contractor. I'm a DA civilian. My agency is XYZ." He said, "Oh, so you're not a contractor?" And he said it again. And I said, "No, sir, I'm not." And he said, "Well, listen, you guys need to abide by the policy, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, "Sir, I've not seen that policy." I said, "But if you're telling us that we can't do PT, I see everybody around this post. I see some folks over here doing what they want to do. And, I see it all over the post. Are you guys policing up everybody?" And he's pissed off. And frankly, as a DA civilian, going to bat against a 2-star general doesn't really work out very well. And in all honesty, I could have gotten in a lot of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I was respectful about it. The point is that what he was looking to do is he was hoping we were contractors and he could throw our asses out of country, is the point.
Yeah.
He was another example of a flag officer that swallowed it all, hook, line, and sinker. And he just had a bone to pick with us civilians doing our thing, and he wanted to throw us out of country.
Yeah.
I don't know, that amazed me. And to your point earlier about how did Mussolini do what he did, how did Hitler do what he did, and you hit it on the head. They used exactly what our local, state, and federal government did. They othered the other people. They made them to be not a human, but a person that is going against their edicts, as Aaron said. And they absolutely, you could see it in people's faces. I mean, if I could get away with not wearing my mask in public, I didn't wear the damn thing. And you would see people look at you like, let's just put it I was the Jews of the past at that point, And of course, that is not at all intended to be anti-Semite. I'm pro-Israel all the way. The Holocaust was evil. My point is that's what they did, as you were alluding to, Lee.
Guys, this is a live version of word association. I don't think we've talked about anything that we planned on talking about. We've just been playing the game of word association, topic association.
Well,
it's fun though.
Yeah, I figured it would go this way. So Lee, let's go on to a jovial conversation, and then maybe we can also hit on one of the incidents we spoke on before the show. But I want to back up a second. Today is a special day for you. Can you talk about that?
It's a somber day. We're recording this on March the 29th. So 79 years ago today, my great uncle Howard was killed in action in World War II. There were 5 weeks left to go in the war. My grandfather there was nine boys and a girl that made it to adulthood. There was a 10th son that only lived a day or so. So my grandfather's favorite joke was he had 8 brothers and each one of them had a sister. And it was always fun to him that people would not realize it was all the same sister. They were like, "So there were 16 of you?" No, there wasn't. That just amused him greatly. 3 of the brothers were in the European theater of World War II, my grandfather being one. Another brother named Dewey was there as well, and Uncle Howard was there. Howard was actually the first one. Well, he was younger than my grandfather, but he was in combat before my grandfather was. I have copies of a series of letters that Howard sent my grandfather. I don't have the ones that my grandfather sent him because presumably they were destroyed overseas. Howard in December of 44 received a Bronze Star when he and another soldier saved their unit. They got flanked, and the medal citation read that with courage and accurate rifle fire, or were just something to that effect, they repelled the attack.
Awesome.
So December, excuse me, that was in December of 44. March 29th of 45, outside of Dosenheim, Germany, their unit was pinned down, and his commanding officer wrote a book. And so I have read the excerpts where he talks about my uncle getting killed. And then I read a firsthand report from one of the other soldiers that was there. What happened was the unit got pinned down, and they were taking friendly fire from behind from an American tank unit.
Oh, no.
And so the commanding officer had to go back, climb into one of the tanks, and stop that from happening. They were taking a withering fire from the Germans coming from the front, and they all were pinned down. And Howard got behind a tree with a BAR and was trying to put fire on the enemy. And apparently a sergeant was calling for him to take cover and get down, and he refused to give up his position. And he stayed there until he was hit with a 20 millimeter shell.
Oh,
and
wow.
Of course, that killed Howard. And that's all coming from 2 firsthand accounts written by people that were there. My grandfather, who was in Italy with a different military unit, wrote a letter to Howard, and it came back. The envelope was marked, just stamped deceased. And that's how my grandfather found out that his brother had been killed in action.
Holy cow.
And I have a copy of that letter in that envelope with that stamp on it. My grandfather would talk about it some, but not a lot. He and Howard were very close, but I'd heard stories about him. I saw Uncle Dewey just before he died, and I sat in the living room with him, and probably for an hour and a half, he told me all of these stories and everything about Howard. And he says, "You got to promise me that you'll keep his memory alive." And, I kind of feel like it's it's an obligation. I never knew the man. I'm sorry getting emotional, but
No.
I was doing
Perfectly
good till I
okay.
was thinking about sitting there with Uncle Dewey, and him
Well,
like, "You've got to make sure he's not forgotten." And
we will highlight this on the show notes and make sure that it's understood. And please forgive me if I mischaracterized. But
sure.
what I would tell you is that is some amazing family history. You have a family of service, so that's neat.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I said that was super impactful to me.
Yeah. Howard, Papa and Uncle Dewey both survived. Came home. They joined the Air Force Reserve when it split off in 47, and they were called back to active duty for Korea. The next brother in line, Uncle Raymond, I think it was, there's 9 of them, so it's hard to keep them all straight, was drafted and went to Japan on occupation duty in 46. Then the youngest brother, who's only a year older than my mother, was in Vietnam, and he passed away last year. You think about things. My great grandparents sent 3 boys to World War II, lost one of them, then had 2 of them called up for Creole, though they didn't go in country. They had a son and a grandson in Vietnam at the same time.
Wow.
You know, it's I've got a picture taken in 1943, and it's got all of them together. And, my mama's in the picture. My grandfather's holding her. Well, the youngest brother is sitting in my great grandfather's lap, and he's the same age as my mother. Like a year or so apart. And it's just, how much could one family do?
Well, that I would tell you, that is, you certainly have a extremely patriotic family, a family of service. I'm very, very impressed, for certainly. We're glad that you could articulate that about your Uncle Howard, and we'll certainly highlight that.
I've got a cousin, David, from one of the brothers, and David was the grandson that was in Vietnam, and he and I correspond occasionally. And, because he's kind of got the same thing as it's up to us to keep Howard's memory alive. And, I'm being told all this 1980s. And so it's still 40 years after the fact of it all occurring. And then now we're 30 years beyond that, and it's still a sore spot with the family.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's clear that it's very emotional for you, but what it also shows is that you're, we're joking about this. You're very empathetic, and emotion's a good thing in warriors too. I just might add.
If I could throw one more thing on that.
Absolutely. Talk all you want on it.
I went to Howard's body was brought home, and it's in the family cemetery over where my mother grew up. And I went there several years ago, and there was a small American flag at his headstone. And I thought that probably a veterans group had come out there and put it on his grave. It comes to find out that one of the soldiers, the one that wrote the first-hand account that I've read, went back to Europe, and he took American flags to every battlefield where he lost a comrade.
Wow.
And then he went back and found their grave sites and placed those flags at their headstones, and that's how that flag got there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I'd like to think that we still have some individuals that would do something so profound like that, taking those flags. I'm sure there still is, but man, when I hear you tell those stories, it does just simply make me think of the greatest generation as it's been coined. So, yeah.
So
well, go ahead, buddy. No, please.
It's just that the most vivid memory I have of my Uncle Dewey was him telling me, "You've got to remember him." That he knew his time was short. And it wasn't, the things that I've done and the things that everything's like, you've got to remember him, because he didn't leave any children.
Oh yeah.
He turned 19 in Europe. And, I guess we can bring it back to the training thing. One of the letters that he wrote to my grandfather was talking, because my grandfather was in basic training. And he's like, "I know you're probably tired of all the classes that you're having to go through right now, but you better pay attention because you're going to need them."
Very, very, very good point that he made. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll just say this, how impactful, a letter like that would be,
right.
And again, I was not in that circumstance, I didn't go to World War II. But I will tell you that I still have a lot of my letters that I received from loved ones when I was in basic. I mean, those letters mean a lot. And when you get a letter like that, say, "Hey, you better pay attention because you're going to need it." That such a prophetic letter that he would receive. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, there were 4 that were in my grandfather's things that I have, and I pull them out every now and then, like on the dates of things, and I read through them. And I go hunt down cousins that are the generation younger than me. It's like, hey, you've got to remember, and tell them things, and make sure that they know. And then, of course, I put stuff out on like stuff like this whenever the stuff comes around. Um, if we forget those people,
Yeah, absolutely. We can't. We can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it also reminds me of how important the written word is. Even with pencil and pen, or excuse me, pencil and paper, or pen and paper. And this is slightly changing subjects, but I sit here. I've got these around here. I've got so many of these notebooks laying around that I've filled. And I've said this before, and I don't at all compare to those letters. What I mean by it, is the value of the written word.
Yeah.
I would be extremely, heartbroken if I lost some of these notebooks, and they're just my words either to myself or my notes.
Yeah.
Some of the one of these is a jiu-jitsu notebook, and I got ones behind me there that are just my journals. I mean, it has stuff about TACCON, about my first ECQC, all that stuff. So, I mean, you just made me think about how the preservation of the written word is so important, and especially in the light of your uncle, your family, your grandfather is also a very important reminder of maintaining those records.
Yeah. On days like this, I think about if I could go back and sit down and talk with my grandfather now. The only direct question he ever answered was, I was at their house once when I was little, and there was some war movie on, and of course, the bombs are dropping out of the planes and they're whistling, and I'm like, "Papa, do bombs really whistle like that when they drop out of the planes?" Like, "Yeah, boy, they do. They whistle like that." And that was like really the only question that he ever directly answered. 'Cause sometimes I would ask him a question, I'd see the pain in his face, because I had that stupid stuff, and I don't want to talk about it, and now I wish I could sit down and have an adult conversation with him. Because he was, oh gosh, he was in his 20s and had 2 children when he got drafted and went. And, what was the difference? Like, he's got the added fear of, am I going to get killed? But is my wife going to be able to take care of my children? What are they going to go through? And just all the, just a couple of quick things. The operational security and all the written words. He couldn't tell my grandmother where he was. But he found out through scuttlebutt that a troop train was going through their hometown. And so he smuggled a note to another soldier who threw it out of the train as they went through the hometown with my grandmother's name written on it.
Oh, wow.
And somebody found it next to the tracks and took it over to the house and gave it to her. We've got that.
That is awesome.
And another one, he did his basic
You said you have that?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. He did his basic training at Camp Blandon in Florida, but at some point in time was getting sent to Virginia for something. So in a letter to my grandmother, he started writing like a story, like a narrative type story. And one of the characters in the story was like Virginian. He was like writing like, hey, Aaron, when you see Eric the next time, tell him that Virginia's is whatever, trying to tell her there's in Virginia, and the centers caught it and cut it out of the letter.
Oh, wow.
So it's just
Upset
different times. And so you think about, the pen and the paper, you had that tangible thing. Well, now we do everything by email.
Mm-hmm.
And so are we going to lose that whole flavor of thing? Because, if something happens to me, my family's not going to have a way to get into my email, which is probably good in some respects. But, it's, letters, correspondence between me and my cousin David, where we've talked about all this other stuff with the family history and all that stuff's going to get kind of lost.
Well, and I feel bad, and I probably need to reinstitute that. My mother or I should say our mother, she very, very much, even up until recently, liked to exchange letters. And when I was in basic and when I was deployed, when I was even in just Korea as an assignment, but especially when I was deployed, I would get letters from my mother. And I know I have a good bulk of those. I need to pull those out. Of course, she's still with us, but I definitely would say that, receiving letters from my wife, from my mother, other family members was the highlight. Boy, especially in basic.
Yeah.
Man, when Sunday would roll around, or I mean, we would get letters at various points of the week. But man, talk about a morale booster. And hell, I wasn't in war yet. But, it was the first time I'd spent that much time away from my wife. And then also, of
Your
course, we
son.
had, being away from Nick was the hardest.
Bro,
And
I was in the car when you were reunited with your son. And it was sad because he was crying because he didn't recognize you.
yeah, that was tough. Yeah, he definitely didn't recognize me, and he wouldn't let me hold him for another week or so.
Man.
So yeah, that was tough. And
Well,
now,
now that dude's a Marine stationed in Japan right now.
yeah, yeah. Shout out to Nick out there. I love you, son. And then, of course, he's been going through quite a few exercises recently. So Okinawa, of course, is an island to the west of the mainland of Japan. So he's been doing some exercises on mainland, that pretty long exercises. So he's been having to go through the same thing where his son's old enough that he doesn't, it's not that he doesn't recognize him, but he's having to go through those homecomings a lot more. And my son told me the other day that now he knows what I went through. Yes, and now I'm going to be the one getting emotional.
Well, Pawpaw made it home December 31st of 45. He sailed back into New York Harbor on Christmas Day. And then, of course, train travel and everything back to Georgia. He got released from Fort McPherson on New Year's Eve. He got home 23 days before his youngest daughter died.
Oh, mercy.
And that was the reason he got to come home, because he was a late war replacement troop. And he was in the 34th Infantry. And they were transferred him to the 88th Infantry, and he was actually going to have to stay in Italy on occupation. And the Red Cross actually intervened because my Aunt Patsy was in such bad shape. And they got him transferred, and he got to come back home with the 34th. And like I say, he got home 23 days before she passed away. She had a kidney disease, Bright's disease.
Oh.
And, I've got a clip of the article where Aunt Patsy couldn't sleep unless she was being rocked. And my grandmother was sitting up all night rocking her in a rocking chair trying to sleep. And so someone got got it to the newspaper, and they ran a story asking if anyone had a rocking cradle that they could donate to my grandmother, so that Patsy could sleep, so that my grandmother could sleep at night.
Oh, wow.
So my grandfather made a book of all this stuff, and I've got that. And, just think about that. He missed almost all of her life.
Yeah, that's tragic. But again, it's a lot of individuals, over the years have dealt with those exact situations. Doesn't make it easy whatsoever. War does a lot of, it has a lot of second, third, and fourth order of effects for certain, and that's an important reminder.
And it's also a thing is, we can't just flush this thing down the drain.
Yes.
There's been too much personal sacrifice made by too many people. And we're going to flush it down the drain over petty differences.
Right.
Guys,
Absolutely.
I'm not going to mention the topics because I just don't want to go there. But I'm kind of tired of in the media, in movies, we're bombarded with a couple of issues that seem to be the most important issues on planet Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And they mean a hill of effing beans compared to what is going on around us. It's freaking distraction. I'm not saying a conspiracy theory that it's on purpose. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But it has served as a distraction. And I bring it back to, again, here we're going on word association exercise again. I make a pretty good living, but I calculated it. I make $20,000 more than I did when I started this job on the basis of inflation. That freaking hurts. And going back to economics, when you hand out monopoly money, all the rest of the monopoly money is worth a lot less. I know that's trite, and lots of people still understand that, but we've been freaking hit hard with stuff so maybe people have seen that I got a new car a few weeks ago, and I wasn't planning on getting a new car, but my son, he's 18 now, he saved up cash for a 2007 Cadillac SVT, I think it was, or something like that. And to be frank, that car was a hunk of junk. It finally died about a month ago, and we started looking at cars for my son to buy. You want a decent used car that'll last you a little while? Ridiculous how expensive it was. So I said, okay, I had a 10-year-old Lexus that I literally do not remember doing any repairs on. I don't remember any repairs on it, just maintenance. And I decided to sell that to him at a good price. He didn't, I said I would change the timing belt whenever it needed to be changed and give him a little bit of a deal. He didn't have to pay for TT&L and get a loan. And so I got a new car, but I didn't care to get a new car. But it literally made the most sense because of how expensive things are. Again, man, we're talking about so much stuff that.
You mentioned free money and evaluation. Higher education is facing there's a term that's been thrown around called the enrollment cliff. And we've had all this free money, and the society has pumped up this whole thing is you have to have a college education. And people have gotten this notion that they're entitled to a college education that somebody else has to pay for. And like in Georgia, we have the Hope Scholarship. If you keep a B average in the core subjects in high school and you maintain a B average in college, you get free tuition at a public university or college.
Yep.
And so because that money was not coming out of pocket, the universities and the colleges just started increasing tuition because now it's just being transferred from one government coffer to another, and nobody's actually having to pay the bill. And during COVID, enrollment numbers dropped and they're not coming back. And so we've got this whole segment of this whole thing's been built up in the higher education industry. And just in the last month, 2 private colleges have announced that they're closing because they can't get the student bodies number. Notre Dame College in Ohio and Birmingham Southern both folded.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah. One of the colleges that I went to as an undergrad, Valdosta State's enrollment has dropped like 12%. Because what we used to get at Valdosta State was, because it's on the Georgia-Florida line, it's an hour and a half from the beaches in Jacksonville. It was as far away from Atlanta that students from Atlanta could get away from mom and dad and still get the Hope Scholarship, and then they could go do the beach thing on the weekends. And so there was a huge enrollment surge from Metro Atlanta at Valdosta State. Well, since COVID, they haven't been doing that anymore. They're either staying and taking classes online, or they're not going to college.
So Lee, I got a question for
Sure.
you on that. And so obviously the inflationary aspects of, the cost of college is absolutely an aspect. Do you also believe, of course, folks can choose a scholarly path that they will gain an education worth something, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But is also some of that based on the fact that a lot of education in college or the higher education is not worth what it used to be, and then also the advent of, or what I should call it, is a resurgence of technical schools, that can give you a career in a skill that is way more lucrative, than what you get out of a college education. I know that's a lot there, but
Actually,
is that also?
we
Yeah,
accidentally just stumbled back into one of the topics that we were going to talk about,
yeah.
that we planned. The program that I'm doing at Oklahoma State, Workforce and Adult Education. One of the things in that program was that society has placed such a value on a college education and has looked at technical and career education as that's for the students who couldn't make it academically and get into college. And as we're facing this enrollment cliff, and basically the higher education game has basically revealed itself to be a farce, should we be pushing our children, hey, let's go get some technical skill, some job that you can actually do? Because here's the funny thing is, I have 3 college degrees and none of them actually taught me how to do anything.
Oh yeah, amen.
And
Well,
there's a technical college 5 minutes from my office, and I was looking at their things like, you know what? Maybe I need to go take a class in auto mechanics or welding or something like that. Well, they only offer them during the day. Well, how am I supposed to do that and work? So
Well,
I think we'd be better off pushing people into career and technical education rather than some
yes.
useless. Now, this is coming from someone with multiple useless liberal arts degrees, some useless liberal arts degree that does not have a job waiting for it at the end.
Well, Lee, I'm going to use myself as an example. So I probably have 85 hours of college that I have accumulated over the years, both, at junior college and college courses I took while I was in the Army. And I never completed a degree, but I took all the basics, of course, higher math, chemistry. I took a lot of electronics engineering classes, for which I did in the Army. So I never gained a college education, but I focused technically more so. And then, of course, I am absolutely in a technical field. Part of that also that education came from the Army. My AIT was 10 months long. So I was in school for my MOS for 10 months, and it's in a very technical field. And what I would tell you is that I am not, what's the word? It doesn't bother me that I don't have a degree. I gained an education throughout my career that, is what I needed. And I have, to speak to, like Aaron said, I've had a lucrative career, and I can retire in 6.5 years, which is what the plan is, and then do EvoSec full time with Aaron. But I think I'm giving that as an example. I came up through a technical skill versus a college education, and it's done well for me.
Well, and for like, I kind of went amen about your useless degrees. Now, I feel that same way for the most part, but right, you can choose a college degree wisely, like I did, but it was because I knew I needed to choose wisely. So I have an accounting degree, and this I have 2 points about this. I am glad that I finished a college degree. It's something that is still semi point of accomplishment and pride, but it did give me a skill that I could make a good living with. But man, I can tell you, I can probably remember 5% of my accounting training, and it goes along with the same thing about technical schools and training, getting experience and skill set. I still make a good living because of my experience and just learning business and how to do accounting. I deal I deal with people that know 10 times the accounting that I do. 25-year-old CPAs that are auditing my work, and I got to teach them shit all the time.
Yeah.
And I did initially go to college with the intent of being a middle school teacher. And I think I told that story the first time I was on the
Yep.
show. And so that was what I started out to be. And then bureaucracy got in the way, and I was closer to a political science degree than anything else. So that's what I went and finished with. But it comes down to nobody wants to get their hands dirty anymore.
Yes.
And we're losing that as a society, as a whole. And it's hard for, say, law enforcement agencies, cop agencies right now to hire enough people to fill the positions that they need to do the job they're doing. But it's not just us. Uh, Firefighters, fire departments
Yep.
aren't getting the people they need. EMTs are, ambulance services and everything. They're not getting the people that they need.
The military as well, buddy, as I know you know.
Yeah, and I'm sure you start going across all sorts of industries, and our systems as a whole are not producing a workforce that we need to satisfy our need. Then we wonder why companies outsource.
Yep.
And it's because other countries, they push people into career and technical education instead of useless liberal arts degrees.
Yes, and Lee, I know that you were a little tongue in cheek about your degrees because I see the value. You provide us value through your education as well, I might add.
Right.
But what I was gonna really double down on, and that's why I loved, I should say, Mike Rowe's Dirty Jobs show, because you hit it on the head. There are technical jobs that young men and women can go to a VOTEC school, because that's what they called it back in Oklahoma. I don't know if it's still called that right now. Of course, one of our most important mentors, Mike Brown, former Tulsa police officer, he teaches. Of course, what he teaches is essentially a police academy.
Yeah.
But again, that's at a technical school. But yeah, I'm just really doubling down on that. We need plumbers. We need electricians. We need mechanics. We need all those jobs filled for our society to be functioning. And yeah, once we lose that type of workforce, it's detrimental to our society. So that it's interesting that you have those same thoughts, and it's not surprising to me either.
It's kind of think where I want to go with that. It's we've all decided that we want to place importance on the wrong things. When I say we, I'm talking the imperial we in society.
Sure.
And, I'm better than that, or that's not good enough for my child. And the like, the county that I used to work in, both public high schools there rank in the top 2% nationally as far as test scores go. Top 2% nationally. There is a local business there that is a metalworking shop. And the owner of the shop approached the high schools like, look, I'll buy all the welding equipment, all the equipment that's needed for these programs if you will institute an academic program to teach the students how to use them, and then I can hire them when they graduate from high school. And the answer was, our students don't do that kind of thing. Okay, so here we have an employer in the county that can't hire people from the county.
Yeah, and again, that is a perfect scenario.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it, that's well, our students don't do that.
Yeah.
And yet that's that type of program, and I know I'm getting a little bit nebulous in the way I'm describing it, but I like what Mike Rowe has said about it. And, he's a fascinating person if you hear him on podcasts. A
Very
good example of a classical education. I think in English, I think in literature, possibly. I may be wrong. Doesn't really matter. But, then he realized that, how important this was. And, yeah, and I honestly, I'm glad to see that more kids are going into technical schools.
Yeah.
Because I know the point I was going to make is that he always speaks about how balanced and happy those people are that he has worked with over the years in dirty jobs. And for that part, for the other aspect of it, doing very well wealth-wise. So
one of the reasons I enrolled in this adult education program was I was having trouble relating to people that I was having to teach that didn't come to it with the same mindset that I did. Yeah, I want to be at training. I love this stuff. This is what I love getting out of bed each day to go, do more training. But I wanted to learn how to more relate to the people that they're only doing it because their job tells them they have to.
Now, Lee, you're referring to firearms training
firearms and then other stuff too, because
I
teach a lot of the different topics related to the job, but mostly firearms and the like. And one of the things that I learned in the program was that adults resist any kind of education because their brain goes right back to all the things they hated about education in school, like traditional classroom education. And, the art of teaching students, like when I was a middle grades ed major and everything, all of that was called pedagogy. Okay. The art of teaching adults is androgogy.
Really? I had not heard that word. I always associated pedagogy with adults as well. Go ahead.
Yeah. And it's funny, even in some of the literature for the adult education classes, they refer to the pedagogy of the class. But there's a whole theme in this program about androgogy. And one of the things is that adults want to be able to draw on their past experiences as they learn new things. They want to have choices. They want to have a facilitator more so than someone standing over them saying, this is what you're going to, in certain context and everything. And this is all perfect world adult education stuff, not reality making it go. And so it began to make me think of ways I could present material to students. And I'm talking to like people in in-service training and then my open enrollment classes. I had kind of devolved into, I know all this stuff because of all of my training. Here's the best way to do this. Now go do this. Well, learning in this program that sometimes that's not the way necessarily people want to learn. So what I started doing, I did an experiment, was I would show, excuse me, I would show one or two techniques that I knew to be inferior, and then I would show the superior technique. Now you try them. Okay, which one worked better for you? And of course, they went to the one that I wanted them to do because they found out on their own that it was the superior technique. And so it's just different ways of saying the exact same thing and acted like they had a choice in the matter.
Well, Lee, can I add something to that?
Sure.
That's awesome.
Because I had a thought on that just recently in teaching grip. And I had that exact thought. Because, the way that I teach, I know Aaron the same way, is we show them what we want them to do correctly, or what we believe is the correct method of gripping a pistol. And I had that exact thought, or at least something around that, when I was driving the other day, is how do I convince people that they should grip the pistol this way? And that was exactly what I decided at that very moment I was going to try the next class I taught, is to show them what really is natural for people to grip the pistol a couple of different ways, or what's commonly done. The thumbs forward grip, or what most of us use, is so common now. People are learning it just by osmosis or visually seeing it, but we still have folks show up that don't know. But I'm going off onto a tangent. My point is that I had that exact thought. It's like, the next time I teach grip, I am going to absolutely have them shoot with a couple of different grips and the grip we prefer. So it's profound that I stumbled. Go ahead.
So think about this. I know you guys are heavy into Craig Douglas and stuff. Craig teaches that two of the 2 count of the 4 count draw stroke to come up high in that pectoral index.
Thumb pectoral index.
Yeah, and then the hands meet together and to go out. Well, one of our other guys, this is when I was with the SO, was starting to try to teach people the old escalator draw because it's faster. Well, it is. It is, undoubtedly. If all we're doing is we're looking at the results on the timer, it's going to be faster to the right of the decimal point. Instead of getting into this big argument over which one's better or all this kind of stuff, I just took a folding table to the range and a chair and had everybody sit down at the folding table. Okay, now try the escalator draw. Now try the...
Yep.
Do you want to have to try it? Well, when I'm here, I'm going to do this, and I'm here, I'm going to do that. Or how about you just do this every time you come out of the holster with it? You make the decision which one works for you. And I have not had to have that discussion again. So
Excellent.
with the clients that I'm teaching now, my new job is I'm just going to have them sit at tables and learn to draw. Yeah.
And let me make some more notes. I've been thinking about stuff I can steal here.
And that kind of thing is what, having to think about how you teach adults and different ways to do it and approaches it. Instead of bashing my head against the wall, find ways that leads them into the discovery.
Yeah, that's
what
awesome.
They need to do. Another one that I'm going to do is I'm just going to take movable target stands with me. I've got the little wood uprights that, we do, put the IDPA targets on or whatever USPSA targets on. I'm just going to put one of those about waist height in front of every shooter on the line. That makes them get their muzzle up higher, to get on their presentation. And then I'm going to let them figure it out on their own. I've got to get the gun up here into this. Basically, I'm forcing them into a thumb pectoral index. Another thing that I'm going to do with that is with the blue guns, I'm going to make them fight each other.
Nice.
Not really fight, but okay. How are you going to deal with this situation? If this guy's this close to you, you've got to get your pistol out and go to work. And, oh, well, I need to come to here because if I come out here with it and start coming up, he can foul my draw. Yep. There you go.
That begs the question, how many, because I know you're teaching at least fairly experienced shooters and,
I'm teaching brand new rookies and fairly experienced shooters. Yeah.
So then how many, of course, I know the beginning students, but how many even of the experienced trained officers understand retention shooting or number 2, number 3, etc.?
It's going to depend on who trained them and how often they're getting the training. And if coming through a basic academy and then going out if you go to work for an agency that training equates to just you pass the qualification course, they're not going to understand that.
Well, and that also brings up, I'm tangential here, but when we're talking about how to teach grip, that's one of the ways that I teach the importance of, try to get across the importance of grip.
Right.
I will shoot only from the number 3, and I guess whatever we want to call it, 3 or 4, it just depends. But I will shoot loosely and let my, just 3-4 yards, but see where my rounds go, right? And then we've got no sights involved, other than index. Okay, I'm getting too much into it, but then I'll show with a good grip, quality grip, and show how much my rounds tighten up. And but because the grip, to me, I like to explain the grip as a set of shocks and your suspension on your car. Your pistol should, when you go over a bump, your car goes back into the same position it was before it went over that bump, in relation to the tires in the ground and distance for the car from the ground. But so your pistol should kind of do the same thing. Your hands, when you fire that shot, your pistol should go really right back where it was when you fired the shot. So I think that's a good way to get it across too.
It comes down to being a guide that leads them to the right discoveries versus trying to force them into a mold. And a lot of that's going to be generational differences. Going back to my raising, I grew up with all of my great uncles and aunts around me. And so I have a natural deference to authority figures that
I remember you saying that a couple of times.
Yeah, that I believe have the legitimate authority to tell me what to do. Now, some stranger on the street, okay. But I'm programmed that if I go to a coach or a teacher, if I'm choosing them, that I want to hear what they have to say and everything. That's not necessarily the case with the clientele that we're getting. Now, in the open enrollment world, if they're choosing you for a reason, hopefully. That may be just because you're the first name that popped up when they hit Google, and depending on the classes that you're teaching as well. If you're teaching like a license to carry class, they just want to check that box and go on. And the clients I get with my open enrollment classes tend to be people who have sought me out for particular reasons. But when I'm teaching an in-service class or I'm teaching a basic academy class, I get some people that they're only there because their job requires them to be there. And so with them, I'm having to learn how to make a different approach of, I have to guide them to the right answer versus just telling them what the right answer is. And it's making me a better teacher. I guess it's funny. I got thrown back into the institutional world of having to follow somebody else's program versus I've basically been able to run amok on my own for years. But we tend to teach people in closed environment settings, and then we expect them to perform in the open environment. And if the training does not involve some open environment aspect to it, then they're not going to make it. Transfer is being able to take the lessons that we learn in training and apply them to real world situations. I'm sure there's a BJJ, martial arts equivalent to it. But like with the firearm, if I stand you, you have to stand at this fixed spot on the range, and I'm going to tell you when you get this start signal, whether it be the target turning, me blowing a whistle, the buzzer going off on the timer, you're going to perform X skill. Your brain processes all that. You retrieve the right motor program. You stand there and all you do is just execute it. Well, what happens when you're in the open world and you get the stimulus to perform that drill, but you haven't mentally prepared for it and performing it? So being able to take that closed drill from training and apply it to the open world is what we call transfer. And some of the literature is suggesting that there's only about a 25% transfer at an optimal level. And I think martial arts does a better job of that, because BJJ, you can pressure test your things. Like, well, I think this works better. No, I think that works better. Well, there's a mat right there. Let's go settle it.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, and it gets settled out every single evening.
My wife proves what works to me about every time I roll with her.
Yeah, it's
it
kind
ain't
of
fair sometimes.
Right. It's hard to do that with guns.
Yeah.
Unless we're going to, do simunitions and do all the other stuff. But even then, you're going to a gunfight.
Yep.
At that point in time. The video that you sent that we wanted to reference and talk about, that guy didn't realize he was in a fight until he was getting stabbed to death. So I think we need to make sure that our training has open environment aspects to it. And we start putting students in positions where they're having to solve problems on their own and recognize situations, versus when I tell you to do this, you do this. And that being the end of it. All right, you're trained. Check off the box.
Well, I'll tell you what, that brings us to a really good point to put this 2-hour interview talk on a bow on it. Because man, we just had so much fun talking about. I think we got some great stuff that we've covered. But I think what this means is, Lee, this is just too much fun to, do this and then go a year like we have in the past. Man, sure. I say if we can work it out to do another show in a week or so, or
sure,
and let's start on that episode, on that video and that unfortunate event with Officer, forgive me guys, Hernandez being that horrific video.
So in a couple of weeks we'll get together and have the show we were actually going to have.
Yeah. But seriously, let's do that, because this is too much fun, and I think it's neat. And again, we do need to cut this off.
Sure.
I think so. Thank God there's some listeners still with us.
Hopefully.
I know. But the point is, guys, it's an honor to be in a realm of a show like your show, our show, and we have a lot of friends that we do these shows and we converse about them. One thing that's great is that our audience, your audience, there's some thinking people that listen to us.
Yeah.
We don't have huge audiences because you know what, we have some good topics that sometimes people just want to hear about: red dots and sub-second draws, etc. But we need to do this again because here we are, these people that like to talk about this stuff and geek out on stuff, and we're sitting. People are, frankly, just listening to us have a fun time hanging out right now. Yeah. Learn and exchange ideas. And, man, it's fun conveying ideas and hope that people appreciate those ideas and those trains of thought. So,
yeah,
Lee,
I like to think of us all as a circle of colleagues versus a circle of competitors.
Oh,
absolutely.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Occasionally I'll get like an email from somebody, hey, you should do a show on X topic. I'd love to, but here's one that's already been done by this other, on that exact thing. that I think covers what you wanted to talk about. I could readily, sometimes I still go do a show on it or something like that. But we don't have to all be, it has to be mine. We can point each other to each other's things.
Oh, absolutely.
We have multiple friends that do shows, and got them on my text dial here. And it's fun because we all care about learning. We all care about conveying the things that we believe, at least at this current point in time in our journey, that will help people. And why not point the people that we care about, our audience, and fellow human beings that want to protect themselves and want to learn and better their lives? Why not point them to other people that they're going to give them so much information ancillary to what we talk about, or other experience that we certainly don't have? Yeah, it's a blast. So full circle, this is just too much fun to not continue it. So after we get off here, guys, let's look at a time when we can talk about that video, because I know we're gonna have a crap ton of stuff to talk about even that.
Yeah, I've got a lot on that too. Well, Lee, what I'll say, and we can start to close out, is the way you articulated giving the clients a decision and allowing them to arrive at what you're intending them to learn is definitely profound to me today, and it ties in to a much higher, what I'll say is a higher thought process than what I had the other day. And it does make me really think about how I can adjust some things in the way that I present. And so just that, again, you got that education, you're completing that certificate, and I get to learn from it. So it's the same what Aaron was saying. But yeah, Lee, it was awesome to get your text yesterday, and it's a blessing to have you on. Like Aaron said, let's try this super soon. So with that said, gents, you have a good day. I mean, it's the afternoon. This is the first podcast we've done in the morning. I think I'm going to go take my wife to a lunch date. So
I'm about to hit lunch myself with a good buddy. So y'all take it easy. Have a happy Easter, as we're recording this right before Easter weekend. Thank God I have Catholic owners in my company. I get off on Good Friday. So, all right, guys.
Take care. Bye.
Take it easy. Bye.